Matthew here from MiniWarGaming.com, and we have a guest star today, or a guest sit-in, or whatever. This is Craig, and Craig is from DC. He's come with his sons to play a bunch of battle reports against us all weekend long. And we had a few discussions early on that kind of gave me the idea for a few videos. So this will be a little mini-series. Maybe it'll evolve into something bigger. And what should we call it? Call it Rules Debates?
Rule Disputes, Rule Debates, yes.
Disputes, I like that better. It really actually speaks to what it is. A debate implies back and forth, like intelligent conversation, but it's not. It's disputes. So Rule Disputes it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over some of the 6th edition 40K rules that people are disputing right now. And we're going to give our opinions. We have the rule books right here, which is essential to a rules dispute. Actually, no, that'd be more essential to a rules debate. A rules dispute, you don't read the rule book. You go based on what you think Games Workshop should have done. But we're going to do a real debate. So I guess it should be rules debates. Anyways, I'm rambling on here. We want to make these videos short and concise so you can leave your comments. So short and concise will, only be like 10, 15 minutes long rather than an hour long. So the one that we're going to start with, so today's topic, is going to be swarms and blast weapons and instant death.
One of the great debates from 5th edition.
Yes. 5th edition, it was never really clear. And I know some people will disagree with me because they think, oh yeah, it was clear, you got this. But okay, so let's say you have a group of swarms. Let's say scarab swarms, they're mostly the same, except for Nurgle swarms. So a swarm that is not Eternal Warrior, and it has toughness 3. They usually have 3 wounds. And let's say you hit it with, let's say, a plasma cannon. Plasma cannon is strength 6. Okay? And a strength 6 is double the wounds, or double the strength, or double the toughness of the swarms, which means it would inflict instant death. No problem there, right?
Correct.
You inflict 2 wounds, you'd kill 2 swarms.
Correct.
But so under the swarm special rules in 5th edition, they are vulnerable to blasts. And that rule still stands, but they no longer call it the same thing. It's just all under the swarms rule. And in that it said any unsaved wound that a swarm suffered became 2 wounds, or something along those lines. I don't remember the wording exactly, it doesn't really matter. So people ask, do you double the wounds and then inflict instant death, or do you just inflict instant death before the wounds are doubled? So let's say you inflicted 2 wounds, should I kill 2 scarab swarms, or should I kill 4? And we'll assume they all fail their saves. So for the whole discussion, we're going to assume nobody makes any saves. So if they could make a cover, let's say they always failed it, just for sake of argument here, to keep things simple. So in 6th edition, I feel that this has been cleared up. So I remember the first thing when we talked about it this morning.
It's based on the wound allocation.
Yes, which is not really simple. It's not. Once you learn it and once you've done it a lot, it becomes straightforward, but it's not the most straightforward thing. So let's read a few of the things. So you've got swarms opened up. I'm going to open up to wound allocation, which is in the shooting section. So what page are you on?
This is swarms on page 43.
Okay, so why don't you read the rule that talks about that?
Okay, if a swarm suffers an unsaved wound from a blast, large blast, or template weapon, each unsaved wound is multiplied to 2 unsaved wounds. However, swarms are adept at crossing less terrain.
That's talking about difficult terrain.
Yes.
So I feel that the key part in here is talking about if a swarm. Now, before we go any further, I want to make a clarification of what I think about Games Workshop rule books. And I love 6th edition, first off, before you think I'm going to start hating on Games Workshop. But when it comes to writing rules clearly, they are not that good. So if there's any Games Workshop employees watching this that are involved in the rule book, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings, but it's just, there's so many things that are ambiguous that it's just not clear. So anybody who argues, well, the rules as written say this, so therefore you do that, well, that's tough because the rules as written don't always make sense, and they contradict themselves sometimes. So I agree, rules as written is a good gauge for how things work, but there's sometimes where it's obvious that it's incorrect. But this is not one of those cases. In this case, it says if a swarm. So when you hear that, if a swarm, do you think it's disputable that it's talking about a model and not a unit?
I think that the swarm, the individual little base, is the swarm. So when you have a unit, it's a unit of swarms.
Okay. Do you think it could be debatable, though, that when they say if a swarm, they're referring to the whole unit and not to the model?
Depends on the take of the player. The player saying that whole unit constitutes a swarm.
Yeah, see, that's the tough part. And see, this is where the debate kind of comes in here. If it was clearly if a swarm model, or a model with the swarm rule, that would be clear. See, that's how it should have been written. If a model with the swarm rule, because they're not a swarm, they're actually infantry or jump infantry. It actually specifies.
That just has that ability of swarm.
Yeah. Like, for example, Ripper swarms, in their entry, I think it's in the Tyranid Codex, it actually says swarms, but that's not an actual entry. It might say infantry. That what they really are is infantry with the special rule swarms.
Right.
And the Scarab swarms are actually beasts with the special rule. I don't know what Nurgle ones are. I never see anybody bring them, so it doesn't really matter. They're not part of this discussion because they don't suffer instant death because they're Eternal Warrior, which I realize they're demons, but it just doesn't make sense to me. And so it says if a swarm, but does not specify a model with a swarm special rule or a unit with a swarm special rule. So the reason that's important is because now that we go to page 15 of the rule book,
correct,
allocate wounds and remove casualties, we're assuming that once again that they all have the same save, that you don't have different cover saves between different ones, just to keep things simple. So, and they've all taken their saving throws, and you failed, or you've suffered 2 unsaved wounds. So why don't you read the part under allocate unsaved wounds and remove casualties?
It says next, allocate an unsaved wound to the enemy model closest to the firing unit. Reduce that unit's wounds by one wound.
Reduce that model's wounds.
Right. So
that's actually important because you said units instead of models, which completely changes it. So
I'm arguing Games Workshop.
Yeah, reduce that model's wounds by 1. Okay, right. Continue.
If the model is reduced to 0 wounds or removed as a casualty, continue allocating unsaved wounds to the closest model until there are no more wounds left, or until the whole unit has been removed as casualties.
Once again, I'll just clarify that you said or instead of remove.
Okay.
So if the model is reduced to 0 wounds, remove it as a casualty. Okay? He said or removed as a casualty. So I just don't want people who aren't looking at the rule book.
Because that is the particulars.
Yeah. So, and then under instant death on page 16, it says, if a model suffers an unsaved wound from an attack that has a strength value double its toughness or greater, it is reduced to 0 wounds and removed as a casualty. Okay? So, we look at this. You've done your wounds, you've caused 2 wounds, you roll your saves, and you've failed 2 of them. So the first unsaved wound is allocated to the swarm in front. Okay? And so that swarm in front, under the special rules for swarms, which I don't have right in front of me anymore. I should have kept mine open to one and you to the other. It says, if a swarm suffers an unsaved wound from a blast, each unsaved wound is multiplied to 2 unsaved wounds. So that specific swarm model suffers. So I guess this could also be argued. Let's forget instant death for a second. Let's say they get hit with a strength 4 template.
Okay.
And the guy in front, the swarm in front, only has 1 wound left. And it inflicts 2 wounds. Okay?
Okay.
So the guy in front takes 1 unsaved wound, which gets doubled to 2, but he only has 1 left, so he dies. And then the next one takes the next wound, which gets taken to 2. Right. So in total, you've only inflicted 3 wounds, even though you hit swarms. So I guess this argument actually extends beyond whether they inflict instant death. It's whether that second wound is meant to go on the same model or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, whether it would slide over to the next model.
Yeah.
As opposed to all being suffered against that primary model that got hit.
Exactly. Like the one in front. In fact, let's say the one in front had 3 wounds still, and the whole unit suffers 2 unsaved wounds. So that one in the front suffers 1 of the wounds, it doubles to 2. Mm-hmm. And then he has 1 wound left, so he suffers the next one, because you keep putting on the same one until he's dead. And that would double, but he only has 1 left, so he dies.
And he's gone.
So the question here, I guess, isn't does he get suffered? Do you have 2 guys suffer from instant death? Does that extra wound get carried on to another model? And my answer would be no.
My answer would be no, too, because that wound itself is doubled. And when that wound kills the creature, that wound leaves with the creature. So you're doubling the wound that's gone already. You know what I mean? It left with that model.
Exactly, because it's the model. It says if a swarm suffers. If it said a unit with a swarm special rule,
correct,
it totally would be doubled, and then all the instant death inflicted.
Right.
That's what I feel. So it sounds like you agree with me there.
I agree.
Okay, so basically, our consensus, and this will remain a house rule until it's FAQ'd otherwise, is that you hit a swarm. I guess this is 2 house rules, because first off, the whole doubling thing is on the model, not on the unit.
Right.
So any excess ones will be lost before you move on to the next model. And the second thing is, because of that first house rule, the instant death basically does not get doubled. Because that one will suffer, he'll suffer 2, and then he'll suffer instant death as well.
Right.
So it's already going to be powerful enough, mind you. You know, hit the Scarab Swarm with a Strength 6 blast, and you do 2 wounds. You've killed 2 swarms, which is 6 wounds. That's already, you know, that's pretty good. But I can see why people would want even more, especially since Scarab Swarms can tear apart vehicles so well.
And I really think in the spirit of the game, if you were to go to the more deadlier option, it would basically remove swarms from a viable unit. They would just be destroyed.
Yeah, because most armies, maybe not most, but most of the popular armies have Strength 6 blasts. You've got your flamers,
Right.
the heavy, not heavy flamers, but the, what do you call those ones on the tanks and stuff, and the dreadnoughts that carry, and the dread knight carries one. Like there's a lot of these Strength 6 flamer template ones, and then you got all your plasma cannons, which are Strength 6 blasts. You got all sorts of things that are that way, and so yeah. But like I said, what do you think? Leave a comment below. I think we're pretty much done here. You have anything to add?
No, that sums it up.
All right, we're going to move on to the next one then. Leave a comment below what you think. And remember, when you go to leave a comment, make sure that you keep civil for one thing. You don't have to call other people names if you don't agree with them. And make sure you have a rule book. Read it, read the particular wording, and then try to make a judgment call based on that. And then read other people's comments. Any ones that you really like, make sure you thumb up the comments. Any ones that you think are really bad, you can thumb down the comment. But not because you disagree with them, but if they're just not being very nice in this debate. Well, this is Matt from MiniWarGaming with Craig, and we'll see you in the next video where we'll cover Death Rays. Necron Death Rays. Can they hit flyers? Coming soon. Happy wargaming.